Hi, welcome to the video. I wanted to share my insights into what I found in the Hebrew biblical text. This isn't a preaching video. This is more like a Bible study, revelation of a lot of stuff that has been lost in translation, and a lot of stuff that perhaps even rabbis don't know about. Um, I have this I have this light behind me for decoration. Um, I had been planning on moving. I've been planning on putting my putting up decoration here because I think maybe that might attract more audiences. Um, Meanwhile, let's get on with the video. Um, Here, let me share just so you get a sense of what I here to read. Hold on here. There we go. Okay, all right. There are two names. Sorry. There are two names for God in the opening chapters of Genesis, and almost nobody reading in translation ever notices they're doing two different jobs. One is Elohim, grammatically plural in Hebrew, but used as a singular noun. And it's the name tied to creation, order, and the command to multiply. The other is Yud He Vav He, four letters, usually flattened into the Lord in English Bibles, and it's tied instead to justice, relationship, and promises made face to face. Genesis doesn't use these two names interchangeably. It uses them like two instruments playing the same piece from different sections of the orchestra. And once you start listening for which one is playing when, the story changes. Start in the garden. God gives Adam a single instruction before Eve even exists. Don't eat from the tree of knowledge of, and this is usually translated good and evil, but that's not quite right. A better read is functional and dysfunctional, decent and broken. The instruction comes from the fused name Yud He Vav He Elohim, both facets speaking as one. Then the serpent shows up, and here's the detail that gets skipped past every time. Neither the serpent nor Eve ever says Yud He Vav He, not once. Their entire conversation happens in Elohim language only, the order and multiplication half of God, with the justice and relationship half quietly absent from the exchange. Eve is reasoning with half the picture. So what actually happens when the fruit gets eaten in sorry. So what actually happens when the fruit gets eaten isn't disobedience in some abstract sense. It's a rupture, a conversation that drops half of what God is at exactly the wrong moment. And what the fruit grants afterward isn't morality out of nowhere. It's the sudden capacity for something the Hebrew calls bosh, usually translated shame, but the root more precisely means disappointment, being caught exposed, undone. Before eating, Genesis says plainly that the man and his wife were naked and not ashamed, not bosh. That's not a statement about clothing. Clothing doesn't exist yet. It's a statement about total unself consciousness. No capacity yet for feeling caught out. After eating, that capacity switches on for the first time. There's a word play sitting right next to this that most translations erase completely. The word for naked in that earlier verse is arum, and the very next verse, the one introducing the serpent, calls the serpent arum too, translated there as crafty or cunning, same word. The naked, unself conscious pair and the crafty, calculating serpent are linked by a single Hebrew root before the story even gets going. The crafty one is about to introduce the innocent ones to a version of his own nature. And when the deity does speak afterward, watch the name again. Not Yud He Vav He Elohim, just Elohim. The man has become like one of us, knowing, and there's that word again, functional and dysfunctional. Adam and Eve don't become like the whole deity, they become like half of one. They gain the Elohim facet, awareness, order, judgment, without the Yud He Vav He facet arriving with it to tell them what to do with that awareness. That's the actual loss in the story, not innocence, wholeness. Then comes the curse. And this is where the story stops being contained to one chapter and starts running for the rest of the book. The ground itself gets cursed for Adam's sake, tied to labor and difficulty. That would be easy to read as a one-time detail. It isn't. Turn the page to the very next story, and the ground shows up again. Cain kills Abel, and Abel's blood, the text says, cries out from the ground itself. And Cain's punishment isn't just personal. He's told he's cursed from the ground a second time, layered on top of the first curse. And it's specifically the ground that will no longer yield to him, forcing him into permanent wandering. One curse doubling down 1 generation later. Fast forward through the genealogy that follows, and there's a name given specifically in hope of relief from that exact curse. A man named Lamech has a son, and he names him Noah, or Noach, actually, in Hebrew, saying, "This child will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because of the ground which Yud He Vav He has cursed." That's not incidental. That's the text itself, marking the thread, telling you explicitly this curse from chapter 3 is still open, still waiting on someone. Before we get to how it resolves, there's something worth catching in why the flood happens at all, because Genesis actually gives you 2 different reasons, tagged to 2 different names, sitting right next to each other. One passage right before the flood describes sons of Elohim intermarrying with human daughters, producing a corrupted population. A strange, brief, mythic-sounding passage, and it's Elohim's name attached to it. Then, immediately after, a separate passage says, Yud He Vav He saw that the wickedness of man's heart was great, every inclination of his thoughts evil continually. And the actual term for evil, translated as evil, is actually dysfunction. Ra, dysfunction. And Yud He was grieved. Yud He Vav He was grieved. 2 different diagnoses, one cosmic and structural, something gone wrong in the created order itself. One moral and relational, human hearts gone bad. Same flood, 2 different facets of God, apparently troubled by 2 different things. And here's where it resolves. Both a flood and that older, still open curse on the ground. After the water recedes, Noah builds an ark and makes an offering, and Yud He Vav He, specifically Yud He Vav He here, responds internally, "I will not again curse the ground anymore for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth." Read that sentence carefully because it's doing something remarkable. It's almost the exact same diagnosis that triggered the flood in the first place. Man's heart, evil continually, except now it produces the opposite conclusion. The problem hasn't changed. The response has. That single sacrifice is what finally answers the ground's curse from all the way back in chapter 3. And it does it through Yud He Vav He specifically. The relational promise-making facet, closing a loop, the ordering structural facet opened. Which brings us to the next thread, because right after this, the text pivots to a new project, and it's not about the ground anymore, it's about a person. Genesis tells us, almost in passing, that Noah was a righteous man, tamim in his generations, And Noah walked with Elohim. Tamim, complete, whole, unblemished. And notice the tense. It's not a task, it's a description. Noah already is this. Then the text moves on, generations later, to Abram. And when God speaks to him directly, the instruction is completely different in shape. I am El Shaddai. Walk before me and be you Tamim. Same word. But this time it's a command, not a description. Something Abram is told to become, not something he already is. And right here, there's a real problem in the text that's worth sitting with, honestly, because most retellings skip past it. Much later in Exodus, God tells Moses, I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as El Shaddai, but by my name, Yud-He Vav-He, I was not known to them, which seems to directly contradict earlier scenes in Genesis where Yud-He Vav-He speaks to Abram, to Isaac, and to Jacob by that exact name out loud on multiple occasions. So which is it? The resolution sits in a single Hebrew verb. The word translated as known there, nodati, comes from yada, and yada in Hebrew almost never means simple cognitive recognition of a label. It means intimate, experiential knowledge. The same verb used elsewhere for physical intimacy between spouses. So the more precise reading isn't they never heard this name, it's they never experienced me as this name. The patriarchs knew the label. They just hadn't yet lived to see what it does. Because what Yud-He Vav-He's name is defined by in this framework is promise fulfilled, deliverance carried through to completion, not blessing and multiplication. That's Elohim's territory. And that's exactly what the patriarchs did experience, generation after generation. The relational, justice fulfilling half of God was still, for them, a name spoken but not yet demonstrated. And Exodus doesn't leave that gap sitting there unresolved. Watch what happens when Moses finally confronts Pharaoh, because the very same word starts showing up as the stated purpose of everything that follows. Yud-He Vav-He tells Moses before a single plague has ever landed that Pharaoh's heart will be hardened, and then explains exactly why, that the Egyptians shall know that I am Yud-He Vav-He. That refrain, that you may know that I am Yud-He Vav-He, repeats across the entire plague sequence, plague after plague, almost like a drumbeat underneath the narrative. And that word know is the same word again, yada, experiential, not a name being announced, it's a name being lived through, which is exactly why the hardening matters and why it isn't simply cruelty or stubbornness dragging the story out. If Pharaoh breaks and surrenders after the second plague or the fifth plague, the demonstration is incomplete, a fragment, not the whole pattern, and a fragment can't produce yada. Only the complete sequence can. So the very thing withheld from 3 generations of patriarchs, direct lived experience of what Yud-He Vav-He's name actually means, gets deliberately, structurally guaranteed to arrive in full for the entire nation at once through a sequence engineered not to stop short. And I should stop here and explain the plagues can be seen to be placed in a visual pattern of rows and columns, units in rows and columns, as Moshe Klein explains in his book, Before Chapter and Verse. It's a display. If you know how the plagues are to be arranged in that sequence, that same process, that same technique of displaying it shows up in the 10 Commandments, shows up in the creation of the 6 days and then the seventh day, It shows up throughout the entire Torah. Um, so watch what happens to that word tamim across the next 2 generations, because the text appears to be tracking Abram's unfinished tasks all the way through to completion. Abram's own name changes around the same moment, from Abram to Abraham, adding a single Hebrew letter, a hey. Spell out the earlier name in Hebrew numerals, and it totals through gematria, and it totals 243. Add the new letter's value 5, and you land on exactly 248, which in later tradition is the same number attached to the positive commandments in the entire Torah. Tradition holds that added letter was borrowed from God's own 4-letter name, which itself totals exactly 26 in the same numeral system, gematria. Abram's new name doesn't divide evenly into that number 26. He's mid-project, unfinished by design, matching the command he's just been given. Isaac's name does divide evenly into exactly 8 full multiples of 26. So Yud He Vav He, the letters add up to 26 in terms of gematria. And Isaac's name equals exactly 8 times 26. No remainder. Jacob's name divides evenly too into exactly 7 full multiples. So you have 8 times 26, and then his son is 7 times 26. There's starting to be a pattern there, possibly 6 times 26 down the road. Also, no remainder. And then generations later, in a completely different verse with no fanfare at all, Jacob gets called Tom, the very same root Noah carried, and the very same root Abram was commanded toward. Not a command this time, a simple statement of fact, the way it was stated about Noah at the beginning of this whole thread. Noah already whole, Abram told to become whole. Jacob simply is whole. A word and a number tracking the same project, arriving at the same conclusion, independently 3 generations apart. None of this is stitched together anywhere in a footnote or commentary handed down to us. It's sitting in the base text, in the letters themselves, waiting for someone to read closely enough to notice the pattern was there the whole time. So I hope that you can understand that. And I just wanted to get right to the point. This is fascinating. I want to write a dissertation on more about the entire Torah, but this is some of the level of depth and understanding that I want to spread out there. And I'll continue working on putting up my decorations on the wall. I know for about $108, I can be able to get a computer workstation and rearrange this room and have a much better, more professionally operating studio. But for right now, it's what it is. I'm thankful I at least have a bit more money to extend having to pay the Verizon bill. So hope you're having a good day, and I'll talk with you later. Bye.